Carmel Sheikh, and it is Science Day today, and we're going to be talking about a very important topic where science is absolutely integral, that is environmental and social sustainability, and why are good standards essential for effective climate action. And I'm joined today by the CEO of KfW, Stefan Wintels, by the CEO of DBSA, Development Bank of Southern Africa, Patrick Dlamini, by Dr. Kat Bruce, who is the founder director of Nature Metrics, very important on Science Day, and by Vice President Ambroise Fayol from European Investment Bank. And just to open, I think it's important to remember what the science tells us before I go to our speakers. We are in the critical decade, and the UN Secretary General laid this out very clearly on day one of this COP. We have to step back from the edge of the cliff. And that means taking urgent action in this decade. Because to keep 1.5 degrees in sight, we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally by half by 2030. And that is a big challenge. It's actually something I'm sure humanity is capable of, but we are not at the moment on track for that. Emissions are actually still going up, and we're already 2 years into that critical decade. But science tells us that we can also build upon the nature and biodiversity that we have on the planet, except that we have been making that rather more difficult for ourselves, because if we look at the latest figures from World Wildlife Fund on biodiversity loss since 1970, it's 69% globally. And I think that rises to something really quite scary, like 94% in some parts of the world, like Latin America. And so, since we live on a beautiful blue and green planet, we cannot fix the climate problem while we're still causing a biodiversity problem. So, that's the environmental side. But at the end of the day, this is all about people. The planet would be just fine if we were not here. The important thing is, can this species survive well on this planet? And when we look at what's happened to Pakistan earlier this year, when we look at the third of the country underwater, when we look at increased hurricane seasons in the Caribbean, when we look at droughts and floods in Africa, when we look at fires that were going on in the west of France, we see that it is everywhere and it is already now. So having robust environmental and social standards is going to be absolutely critical to make sure that while we try and address climate, we make sure that we're not exacerbating environmental and social problems. But it's also an opportunity, because if we bring environmental and social sustainability in, perhaps we can actually accelerate our climate action by taking more account of some of these features. And I know that our speakers today are going to give us some very interesting insights into what their organizations are doing in this area. So I'm going to now turn first to Stefan Wintels from KfW. To have effective climate action from the perspective of your institution, where do we stand on that aspect and environmental and social sustainability?
Thank you very much, Nancy. I think you laid out the factual basis. I'm calling this decade a decade of decision, because I firmly believe this decade we will decide about the future for our kids and their kids. And that's a massive responsibility we have, and this is a responsibility where everybody within his area needs to contribute. And we need to work together. That is very, very clear, and that's why it's so important that we meet here. As a new CEO of KfW, we articulated a new strategy, very simple, KfW Plus, and one of the two focus we have as an institution with 8,000 people operating in 80 countries is, of course, to attack and contribute to climate and environmental improvements. And how we do it, I firmly believe this needs to be scientific based. Otherwise, it's very difficult to argue. And why it needs to be scientific? Because we learn every year. So it needs to be updated every year, and we will make mistakes on this journey, but we need to start now, and it's very urgent. I think it's still 5 minutes before 12, not 5 minutes after 12, and I'm confident that we will deliver at the end of the day, because human beings have dealt with many challenges, situation and crisis, and we have the technology. But this decade, in order to progress, will also be a decade of investment. And public investment will be required, but it will not be sufficient. And hence, we need also a clear matrix and a simple matrix under which private capital can be attracted. It's sometimes very complicated, and there are many other opportunities in this world for institutional money. We as KfW work together with the International Energy Agency. We are committed to 1.5, 1.65, and we will only commit business which is consistent with this scenario. If every bank on the planet and every investment firm would be accordingly act, we would make significant progress, because that is a scenario, and I'm not promoting EAA, I'm not a member of the International Energy Agency, but I think we need a consistent framework where the majority of the world stands behind and said, we don't have a better scenario. And that will be translated into a roadmap against which we can execute and measure our progress and discuss what else needs to be done. Last comment, in order to use the time best, it's not only about climate. We need to have a very broad sense. You mentioned biodiversity. KfW is the largest investor in biodiversity, but these are still very small amounts. And all what we do on climate, we need to do the same on biodiversity. This needs to be scaled up with the same amount, and we are just at the beginning, and time is running there as well. And in addition, other SDG goals needs to be considered, because everything we do should also include social context, etc. And as I said earlier on a panel to my friend Patrick as well, this is an opportunity for many countries in the world now to leapfrog the green transition and attract investments and create jobs. So this is a historic opportunity for countries like South Africa, and they need our support in terms of technology and every advice you want. Not what we think is right at the end, it's you to decide, but we need to cooperate.
I think maybe we'll just, I'll just point at the next person so you can hand it on. But I'd like to ask the same question to you, Ambroise, from the perspective of the EIB. Where do we stand on effective climate action from the perspective of environmental and social sustainability?
Thank you very much, Nancy. And actually, I have exactly the same point as Stefan. What is clear is we need to put sustainable finance as our operating model. And this is the case at EIB. We have a framework that is an environmental and social sustainability framework that we use for everything we do. And this framework needs to be adjusted, but at the same time it needs to have a long-term vision. And this is what we try to do to adapt to a more sustainable model of financing. So if I can give you maybe two examples of what it means concretely. I would say one, it means in terms of managing environmental climate risk and impact, I would give the example of green bonds. We have been the first, EIB, the first issuer of green bond in 2007. But from the beginning, we had the conviction that it was absolutely essential, if we wanted to have credibility, to be in a position to verify that what we were financing were really green projects. And for that, the best thing that we have managed to do is to get external audit. So it's not us, it is audited. And the same way goes for what we say. We have a clear climate target of 50% of our action by 2025. Again, what we achieve is also audited. So transparency is one very important factor if you want to be credible in implementing the sustainable finance as your operating model. And the second example I would give is social inclusion or social sustainability. we attach extreme importance, and we have standards on that in EIB, to gender, to local consultation with indigenous people when there are projects there. And actually, I have seen projects that have not been pursued because the local consultation with indigenous people was not convincing. So this is also how we manage. We have a clear ambition. We know that our standards are clearly high level because we want really to be, as a public bank, to show example about what it means to have sustainable finance as your operating model. But at the same time, this is also, I think, where we can have an added value and contribute to the fight against climate change.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Afternoon to my fellow panelists. For us as a Development Bank of Southern Africa, we have made a very clear and articulate goal that we will make sure that with all our deal financing, from now going forward, 35% has got to talk to climate financing. So, because we do believe that as the development finance institution, we have to lead. And we have also acknowledged that as DFIs, in partnership with our sister DFIs globally, we have to make sure that we work towards promoting biodiversity. Because everything that we do in terms of infrastructure, one way or the other has an impact on biodiversity and environment. So it's quite important that we begin to articulate how we are going to contribute towards the conservation of nature and the promotion and the protection of nature in everything that we do. So it is something that is not going to be by accident, but it's going to be a very clear, deliberate strategy that we as the bank insist on, both in terms of what we directly do and in terms of those actually that we fund. But the social part of it becomes also a very critical element, because it is something we are actually part of the Just Energy Transition team that are engaging the international partner group, including Germany, France, UK, US, as well as the rest of Europe, which is trying to help South Africa in its just transition. But the just part becomes absolutely critical, that the people side of it becomes part and parcel, and we make sure that there is inclusivity, and we also look after the vulnerable and the marginalized communities. So it is something for us that ESG is not going to be something that's going to be distant, but it's going to be part and parcel of what we do. We are aligning to the global best practice. But what is also key, I believe here, Nancy, that integrity in the leadership of organization when it comes to ESG and environmental issues will be very key, because standards and the enforcement of those standards and making sure that everything that we do permeates across the organization, it talks to ESG and our commitment to environment and our commitment to nature. I'm very positive that going forward, we can see also in our partnership through our IDFC partners. I mean, KfW is here. We really are also learning quite a great deal from our partners internationally, and we work in conjunction with them. And as IDFC, you are seeing an increasing commitment that talks to our commitment for actually of billions to trillions. Already in the past 6 years, we are now sitting at 1.2 trillion that we've been able to commit to climate financing. I think that's a very good achievement and a very good commitment. But there is always room for us to do more going forward. So it is something that is extremely central to what we do, extremely central in our DNA as IDFC members. Yeah, it's quite an interesting, but I hope it's not me, Nancy. But really, it is a very necessary part that we all encourage and we all actually implore very meaningful leadership in the direction of ESG, because environment, so the society as well as governance is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand over to Kat. I think you'll probably give us a lot more of a scientific aspect, metrics aspect. So looking forward to hearing from the perspective of your institution, or in your case, Nature Metrics, how you see this topic.
Thanks. Hi, and it's a real honor to be here on this stage in this company. So I'm the founder of a UK venture-backed nature technology company called Nature Metrics. We deliver biodiversity data at large scales, at pretty unprecedented scales actually, by analyzing DNA from water and soils all around the world. So we work on projects including environmental impact assessment projects and conservation projects, many of which are funded by development finance. And when I started the company, which was only in 2015, this was an incredibly niche thing to be doing. And I was really challenged by early investors about whether biodiversity was actually important enough to anyone with money for there to be a real market for nature technology. So the very fact that we are now a venture-backed company says a lot about how this field has changed in the last few years. It wasn't really until COP last year that nature really found its place at the heart of the climate agenda. All of a sudden, we've sort of woken up to the fact that actually our only chance of achieving the climate goals are by investing in protecting and restoring nature at scales that we've never considered before. And that's incredibly exciting, but it means that we're having to move very, very fast in the biodiversity and nature space to catch up with everything that's been done in the climate space already. So we're starting to see everybody talking about nature positive alongside net zero. That's brilliant. It would be wonderful if you guys were all aligning your project portfolios with being nature positive as well as compliant with the 1.5 degrees in the near future. But the challenge with nature and biodiversity is that it's unbelievably complex. Carbon is one molecule and it's the same everywhere in the world. Biodiversity is all life on Earth and it's different in every place and it's all very, very interconnected. And so what we've seen up until now is this tendency to set very general, high-level, top-down metrics that are basically proxies for biodiversity and aren't really linked to what's happening on the ground. And biodiversity is, we're also seeing people thinking about biodiversity in terms of just the sort of main vegetation type, so just trees or kelp or mangroves or whatever. And actually biodiversity is the whole ecosystem. And it will only deliver, especially when we're talking about biodiversity in the context of nature-based solutions for climate mitigation, it will only deliver those benefits for as long as the ecosystem is functioning and living. And the ecosystem is only going to function and live if the whole biological community is there and is intact. So our sort of core message at the moment is just the importance of doing real on-the-ground measurement of nature and biodiversity so that we can track what's changing, so that we can see whether biodiversity is being maintained or improved, and if it's starting to fall away, because that will be really intrinsically linked to our ability to deliver climate outcomes. I think the other thing is that we have to find ways of working with the experts on the ground. There are thousands and thousands of people all over the world who are experts in doing nature restoration and conservation. They haven't had the funding to do it at the scales they would have liked until now, but they have a huge amount of knowledge. The problem is we're having to bring together stakeholders, like banks and ecologists. They don't have any history of working together. They don't trust each other particularly. They don't have any shared language. You say the word taxonomy, and they run in completely opposite directions because it means completely different things. But data is something that people can all coalesce around, and we can use that to show how are things changing on the ground as the result of the impact, the investment, the finance, the actions that we're taking. So yeah, that's my sort of more scientific sort of bottom-up approach to that.
So thank you very much. So I'm going to come back to each of you with a slightly more, I don't know, probing question or detailed question. I don't know how to quite put it. But I'm first going to turn to you, Ambroise. We're obviously not only the EU bank, we're also a global multilateral development bank, and we're currently chairing the heads of MDBs. Though we work extremely closely with all the other MDBs on climate, but increasingly also on nature, as indeed you were making a statement yesterday about. So in the MDB community, but in particular the EIB, how are we setting the standards for sustainability risk management, which I think is quite a new thing for us all. But I think it's something that we're all working on together as well as individually. So can I ask you to give it your best shot?
Thank you, Nancy. Well, when you deal with climate issues, fundamentally you deal with risk issues as a financial institution. And you refer to engaging in a risk management exercise, basically. And that's what we try to do, dealing with the two way you can assess the risks, two main risks that exist, which are the transition risks, both on the project and the counterparty level, and the physical risk. And actually, this is very closely linked to what we have in our climate bank roadmap, which means the climate roadmap is completely aligned with the Paris Alignment Framework. So you have in our roadmap for implementing the climate strategy of the bank, a document that explains to you very clearly the framework, what we can finance, what we cannot finance anymore, etc. And again, disclosure and transparency is absolutely essential there. So in terms of transition risk, I will give you one example about what we do to try to improve the way we deal with climate risk at the project level. We had the question when we were discussing the climate bank roadmap. Should we stop financing roads? And actually, there were a lot of people, NGOs in particular, who were telling us, well, if you want to be the climate bank roadmap, the climate bank, you need to stop financing roads. And this is not what we have done. But what we have done is something where we can say we are going to include in our assessment, we assess all the projects we finance, which includes not only financial and economic, of course, we are a bank, but also environmental and social. But we are include also something which is a shadow price of carbon to assess the project. And the shadow price of carbon is set in a way that is consistent with our goal in Europe, which is reaching the climate neutrality by 2050. So to give you an indication, and it is not something, the figure is not important, but the evolution is. It is about 80 euro per ton in now, and it has to increase until 800 by 2050. And actually, as Stefan said earlier, this is going to be revised because we know regularly we have new information about the need to go quicker or not. But this is the way that we have to explain why it makes sense to continue to do roads under certain conditions, and why we cannot continue if it does not make sense. That's what we do at the project level. We also are developing, we are not at the end of that, a counterparty risk assessment, where basically we check not only at the project but at the counterparty if the risk that is linked to climate is high or not, and what we can do to mitigate this risk. And actually what we are doing now is including an environment part of this assessment. And finally, what we do is also in terms of physical risk, that, for example, the risk of, I don't know, the consequence of flooding or earthquake, or what we do is an assessment of the vulnerability. We do that especially with big public projects, like with cities or regions, or so we do that, and if we assess that the risk is high, which of course happens, then we enter into a discussion with our partners to see how we can improve the project, find ways to deal with the risk that we have identified, etc. So it is becoming really something that is more and more important in the way we assess projects.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Kat a question now. You mentioned the importance of measurement on the ground. So I would like to ask you, so, you know, we're all financial institutions here, right? So what kind of data and metrics do we, the financial institutions, require to be able to carry out robust risk assessments that really meet the purpose and help us achieve our climate targets?
Thanks. Is that on? Yeah, there we go. Thanks. I love this question because a lot of my thesis for Nature Metrics came from sitting in a meeting a few years ago about the post-2020 biodiversity framework. And everybody was sitting around saying, if we want biodiversity to be discussed in the boardroom, the metrics need to be simple. And it's true, right? You need simple metrics. So you say, are we going up? Are we going down? Are we hitting targets? The problem is that those simple metrics need to be driven by more complex data underneath, rather than being divorced from them. If we make metrics that are just simple, we're basically designing them just to be able to tick the boxes easily. We'll measure the things that are easy to see and measure, and actually that's so dangerous because it decouples you from what's happening underground and it masks ongoing losses. Biodiversity it's your classic big data problem, right? There's millions of things responding to thousands of variables, but there is predictable signal within that noise that can tell you when ecosystems are breaking down. We know how to handle big data. We do that, we use that in every aspect of our lives these days. What we haven't been able to do is take nature and turn it into data at the scales that we need to be able to take those sorts of approaches. So that's really what we see ourselves as doing at Nature Metrics, is unlocking the data so we can apply much more sophisticated analysis methods to it, so that we can get to those very simple metrics that just tell us, are you going up or are you going down? So, for example, we're looking at creating metrics of ecosystem health for key ecosystems. So that might be, take a coral reef. If you analyze samples from along the full profile, from fully healthy to really degraded reefs, you can build a machine learning model that learns what's the typical signature in the biological data of a healthy reef, and then lets you take any sample, put it on a scale from 0 to 1, and you can set targets, you can show whether you're going up or down, you can aggregate those measures across different ecosystems, across different projects, to give an overall progress score. Yes, that's the sort of, but you've still got, so you can have your simple metric at the top then, but you've also got the more complex, detailed data at the bottom, which is relevant to the site managers who are having to make decisions about how to manage that natural asset and optimize the outcomes for it.
Sounds like there's a fantastic party going on outside the IDFC Pavilion, so I shall make sure this event finishes on time so we can all get out there and find out what's going on. I'm going to come to Stefan next. I know that KfW has sector guidelines for Paris compatibility and for impact management. So in your point of view, what standards are important for KfW to follow when you're implementing your effective climate finance?
Thanks, Nancy. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, the good news is we have scientific scenarios who try to simulate globally under which assumptions the world could move to 1.5 or 1.6% and determine which technologies and which investments are in line with such a scenario. So that's the good news. The bad news is we have no global agreement on these scenarios. And why? Because people like discretion. Human beings like optionality and like discretion, and therefore nobody wants to be prisoned, in the lack of a better word, by this scenario. But I think we need this scenario, as I said earlier. Given that there is no global methodology and no global standard, what we as KfW try, as I said earlier, to be as scientific as possible. And our head of sustainability is sitting here. He's working closely with the Fraunhofer Institute. Secondly, we always look globally for the best available standard, because things are moving very fast and we shouldn't wait to implement and do the best available and then see whether we can improve. That's also important, and we can learn from sports people. They do the same. And thirdly, which of course is important, transparency. I think that was mentioned by my friend Ambroise. The more transparency we have, the more engagement we have. It's not a risk management only tool, it's also to engage. It's like an open source. So we improve and use what we have available, and that's what I definitely believe. As a development bank, we are not only focused on the climate actions, but also we apply rigorously our environmental social impact assessment, which captures a lot of the SDG criteria, and we also have started to put promotional programs for SMEs on our shelf, which are in line with the EU taxonomy, not because we are a fan of the EU taxonomy, but we have to learn to live with it, right? Again, we need to accept it, align, and implement. So a lot of effort at KfW to do something good, and I found Kate's comments on simplicity and underlying complexity and big data well said. That's something which we should keep in mind, because otherwise we will not get the world moved if we have complex matrix. People switch off, right? Well said.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn to you, Patrick. We obviously, globally, we have, since we only have one planet to live on, we have an unambiguous requirement, shall we say, to ensure that the finance around the world is aligned with the Paris goals. Because if it's not, we're not handing on a livable planet to our children and grandchildren. Africa, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa, I think is at the forefront of experiencing some of that already, and gives us an inkling of what would be to come. So, nevertheless, obviously, whether we're looking at Africa or other regions, you have distinct country differences, right, in terms of income levels, in terms of climate, in terms of social and economic development. And these different needs are all different in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So I would ask, how does then DBSA aim to balance this, challenge between the international need for us all to reach the goals, and yet the very varied national and regional needs that you see in the countries where you operate?
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. It's quite a delicate balancing act that we have to achieve there. But it does not take away the reality that we are faced with. Because in as much as we can say as emerging economies, we are not responsible for the pollution. The fact of the matter is we are the most affected. We are the most vulnerable. We are experiencing massive floods in South Africa for almost twice in the past 3 years. The city of Durban has been annihilated by floods. We also saw in Mozambique, the entire city of Beira was flattened by tornadoes. So these are all signs of climate change. The question is, we cannot be bystanders and claim that we are not the polluters. We are talking about the global commons. The impact of climate change is the responsibility of each and every one of us. We have an opportunity. The global north has expressed willingness to help us to achieve the alignment with the Paris Agreement. We are engaging on the just transition in South Africa. Our government has fully committed. In actual fact, they've even upped our contribution to make sure that we are able to achieve our net zero by 2050. As the DPSA, we have also committed to the net zero by 2050. So now we are busy putting measures in place, and we are also working with our partners. EIB is here, KFW is here, AFD is also around, to see how we really can be able to advance and make sure that as emerging markets, we also play our part, because there are economic opportunities. And the possibilities of green hydrogen says we can be able to run our economies, we can be able to push our economies on a much more cleaner footing if we embrace the change that we are faced with. I don't think we want to come and sit here and start pointing fingers in terms of who's responsible for what. The fact of the matter is we have a responsibility to play our part in making sure that the future is a bright future for our future generations. The future is the right future for each and every one of us living on planet Earth. So we want to be responsible citizens in making sure that our role in moving forward is minimizing the adverse effect in terms of environment. We want to make sure that we are all actually embarking on a low carbon future, because that is what is needed from all of us. So as the bank and as the board and as the country, we are fully committed to a much more cleaner, a much more safer future, at the same time driving economic prosperity, because those two are nearly not mutually exclusive. They are quite achievable. It's just that it says there's got to be very strong leadership on the ground to begin to pivot our economies into a low carbon future. So it is something that we are very much committed to. It is something that the presentation of the Just Energy Transition investment plan that the President Ramaphosa presented 2 days ago here is a plan that we want to ensure that we drive with everything we have, because that will make sure that our emissions are reduced quite drastically. But again, it talks to working with the scientists, as Kat actually highlighted here, that we need to ensure that we have the standards in place, and transparency is going to be quite important. Our partners also want to see that what they extend to us talks to what they also believe in, because we can't be doing what actually is contrary to what they stand for. So for me, really, it's a non-issue that we have to focus everything that we have and to make sure that we commit to a just and cleaner and economically prosperous future.
Thank you very much. And actually, you've mentioned leadership twice, and of course, you're all leaders in your fields, in your organization, and it's great to be here with you, hearing how each of the institutions is leading from the front, because that is what we need now here in the critical decade. So, even more exciting singing outside the pavilion. So in that case, I'm going to be quite brutal with you now. So you're going to each get 1 minute to say what is your one wish for this COP, for next year, for your organization? What's the one thing that you really think we need to do, or you're hoping that your organization will do? I'm going to go to Kat first on that one.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn that around slightly and say what I wish these people's organisations will do. But so I think that one of the real powers that the finance institutions have is the ability to set standards and requirements for projects and to normalise better practices. So I think requiring projects to collect and make available biodiversity data on the ground in all projects would be a huge step forward. And ultimately aligning portfolios with nature positive outcomes as well as net zero ones.
1 minute.
1 minute. For my wish, I so much wish that the global north can really support us in making sure that we give more hope to the peoples of the emerging market and to the peoples of the African continent. I mean, this COP27 is on Africa, and this then says that the people of Africa are really looking forward to something very positive emanating out of COP27 that talks to us building and creating cleaner economies and building and creating jobs that actually are going to give hope and creating an inclusive society for the peoples of Africa.
I would say my wish would be that the enthusiasm that you find here, but we are, if I may say so, among believers, that this enthusiasm you find that outside as well. And that the way things are presented at COP is also shared and explained and in a convincing way to the rest of the population. Because if we have a part of the population that is not convinced, we will fail. I would add a second wish, because you just said one, which is related to what Kat was mentioning actually. I have a wish that COP15 in Montreal in 2 weeks will be successful. And if I say it is a wish, it is because I have worries actually.
There is this saying from Peter Drucker, the management guru, you can't manage what you can't measure. And I would hope that we apply the same rigor we apply in many other disciplines on climate and other SDG goals. And that translates into my wish that we as a friends in the IDFC come together on New Year 2030 and say this was a decade of substantial progress in meeting our climate and other targets. It's 8 years left, 7.5.
So the question is, what is Nancy's wish?
Okay, that's not in the script. I think that my wish is going to be rather similar to yours, Patrick, but also in a way similar to my vice president. It's kind of two wishes. I wish a very successful outcome to the loss and damage discussion. I think, and I speak personally here, I'm not speaking for the bank, I believe that the North or the developed countries, or however you want to look at it, has to step up, not just with finance, but also with support for the rest of the planet, because we're in it together. And you were very inspiring saying, you know, we're doing it. That's, and I think, therefore, that we showed we can do it in the pandemic. We showed that we totally changed our economies, how we travel, how we work. We did it. We need to step up in the same way, I believe, on loss and damage and on action in the countries that are still, at the moment, not emitting practically anything. So that's my first one. The second one is exactly what Ambroise said. I am in a few high-level groups, and I find it quite surprising how little knowledge there is about biodiversity and nature and the interlinkage. And here we all understand that. But outside, I literally sit in meetings where people say, but forests are good, right? Planting trees is good. It doesn't matter. Why would biodiversity be important, And these are influential people. So my wish is in a way similar to yours, that we can somehow find a more effective way, in a positive way, of passing these messages on outside. And it's been great to hear you all. I hope you go back and say exactly the same things to everybody in your organization, because we all need to keep on going as fast as we can. And indeed, as you said, there's 8 years left. I think my favorite hashtag at the moment, apart from COP27, of course, is hashtag don't give up. It's 8 years left in the critical decade. We can do it. There's amazing insights around here, but we cannot do it at the cost of other environmental and social things being forgotten. And I think that's been a very clear message from all of you today. I heard repeatedly from you, Patrick, about leadership. I think that's absolutely critical. Also, the social angle, and reminding us of the severity of the impacts in South Africa and other countries. And of course, if you go to the Pakistan pavilion, you can be reminded some other very recent, very severe impacts. Credibility and transparency and social inclusion. Again, I heard from you, Ambroise, from Stefan, the focus on science and pathways and also measurement. And Kat, I loved the whole issue of a simple metric for an incredibly complex underlying system, and the fact that one single bit of a biodiversity system is not biodiversity, and it's not going to be successful, that we need the whole ecosystems. And at the end of the day, this planet is one big ecosystem, and we are just one species in it, and we need the rest of it to be healthy so we can be healthy. And on that note, I think it's always good to finish early. So I'm going to thank all my speakers. Thank you very much indeed. It was really great to hear from you. Thank you all for attending, and thank you to those of you online, and thank you to IDFC for hosting us here in this pavilion. And I'd like to invite you to give these leaders, because they are all leaders, a round of applause. Thank you.